Welcome to the Daniel Cleland Podcast. Plant medicine. Entrepreneurship. Expat living. The Daniel Cleland Podcast.
Welcome to the Daniel Cleland Podcast. I am Daniel Cleland. Today I have the privilege of sitting down with Dr. Terrance McKenna, PhD. Dennis is the principal founder of the McKenna Academy and a retreat advisor at Soltara Healing Center. He has conducted research in ethnopharmacology for over 40 years. He is a founding board member of the Hefter Research Institute and was a key investigator on the Ayahuasca project, the first biomedical investigation of ayahuasca. He's the younger brother of the late and great Terrance McKenna. From 2000 to 2017, he taught courses on ethnopharmacology and plants and human affairs as an adjunct assistant professor in the Center for Spirituality and Healing at the University of Minnesota. My friend Brian Rose calls the McKenna brothers the OGs of the modern psychedelic movement. Some say their early work in South America is largely responsible for the migration of psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca into modern Western society. Dennis is a prominent ethnopharmacologist, author, and psychedelic expert, but I prefer to call him a friend, a mentor, and a business associate. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Terrance McKenna. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Yes, it has been a while. It's been too long. How long has it been?
I don't even want to think of it. Pre-COVID, certainly, I guess. So, except for the occasional text message. So, are you in Soltara now?
We're close. Yeah. We just actually moved. We moved our studio over down the road because of course we're getting ready for our November 1st reopening post-COVID at Soltara. So we just moved house today. Melissa and I are hanging out at this offsite residence just because there's not enough space at Soltara. But yeah, we've been here. I haven't left Costa Rica since February, if you can believe it. So Dennis, how are things? How have you been? We haven't we haven't seen each other since November of last year. We've been in touch a little bit, but you've been living up in Abbotsford, British Columbia. You moved there a while ago. You've been there throughout the whole past year or so. So how are things, man?
Well, we moved up here in March of 2019, as you know, and so far everything here is fine. Considering the circumstances, like everybody else, we're impacted by COVID. We've been more or less not exactly strictly in isolation, but trying to stay home a lot, which is kind of the normal because that's what I do anyway when I'm not traveling. I'm down in my basement office working online, doing a lot more Zoom calls these days, and just waiting to see what happens. Of course, all of our plans for travel have just been spiked. We were going to have at least 3, maybe 4 retreats in the Sacred Valley last summer. That didn't happen. And, I know you're reopening, I guess, the 1st of November. And, good luck with that. I hope everything goes well, So I guess, this is the new normal. I mean, it doesn't feel very normal, but here we are. So,
yeah, sadly.
Yeah.
I don't know, here in Costa Rica, actually, people have very quickly returned to their normal lifestyles. I mean, the lockdown in the beginning was very, very tense because I think the Costa Rican people and the government really got spooked really early on in the course of the virus. And I think they locked everything down when there was just one case in Costa Rica. Like, it was immediate and decisive, and there was vehicular restrictions, there was nationwide curfews, there were closed borders, closed workplaces, all bars and restaurants closed, all hotels closed, all beaches closed. Every beach was closed. Every national park was closed. I mean, it was all encompassing. And that's how it went for the first 2 or 3 months anyways, from March 15th or so until about, it must have been, I think, in July when they started to open up a little bit, June or July, when they started to dial back a little bit. But and during that whole time of just extreme lockdown, there were basically no cases, very few deaths. It was, maybe 20 cases per day, and, very few deaths, or none at all for a couple of months. But then, there was this kind of overhanging sense of kind of fear. But then as soon as the government started peeling back the restrictions here, man, everybody's hitting the beach. Like, the roads are packed. The hotels are packed. Like, the traffic is insane, right? It's like people did not forget how to live their lives in Costa Rica. That's for sure. So I wonder if it is really the new normal, or if a vaccine comes out. I mean, I think the North American societies are a little bit more, waiting for a vaccine. But I wonder if, when things kind of slow down a little bit, if people just 6 months later, everybody just forgets about it.
What's going on? Yeah. Well, I don't know. This is just what we have to deal with. How are things in Peru? What you hearing out of there? I've heard it was, dying off a little bit, and now it's coming back. Is that the report that you get?
Yeah. Well, we have not been able to fly to Peru since March, right? We've had healers who came up here from Peru who they had a repatriation flight in September, but we had a couple, 2 healers who are working with us in November, December, who we had them stay here. They didn't fly back to Peru. So they've been here throughout the whole pandemic, and they're just going to stay on and work November and December until there are flights back to Peru. Currently, there are no flights down to Peru from Costa Rica. And I think they've opened up flights to a few different countries like USA, Brazil, Mexico, and maybe Spain, I think.
Yeah.
And, I've got obviously lots of connections down in Peru, as do all of us who work at Soltara. And I can tell you, everybody from Soltara, all of our staff, they're really itching to get back there. They want to buy mapacho and mambe and see the people they care about down there, and go do some plant diets and everything. But so far, we haven't been able to get down there, and it's definitely not easy. One of my logistical assistants in Lima, a taxi driver there who helps us out with various different things in Lima, he tells me that the airport's dead right now. He usually picks people up and takes them downtown from the airport and vice versa. He says it's pretty dead there, not a lot of work. But yeah, I think they're trying to open up, and from what I've heard, international flights in October are going to be picking up a little bit, October, November, December, but who knows? The thing about Peru is that it's a bit of a complicated country to manage, right? There are all these different eco zones, and they're separated by the mountains and by jungle, and it's not a very wealthy country in terms of economic wealth, right? A lot of natural wealth, but economic wealth not so much. So the medical system isn't as let's call it efficient and advanced as what you might find in like Canada or USA or even Costa Rica. And Costa Rica has done really well because the medical system here is very efficient and very, very developed. It's well developed. It's almost a Western country, like it's almost a first world country in that regard.
Yeah, it's as good as you could hope for. I think the medical system there, it's you're lucky that way. They have probably a pretty strong public health presence, so that's good, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you end up bringing a beer to the call?
Excuse me?
Did you end up bringing a beer to the call like we discussed yesterday?
No, I didn't. I'm still on my coffee.
Oh, okay.
It's, it's still breakfast time, or it's lunchtime, actually. No, I forgot to bring a beer.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, if you don't mind, I've been saving this bottle of rum for my birthday. It's 1985
Wow.
Ron Centenario. It's Costa Rican rum. And, I've been religiously on a zero alcohol diet from Monday to Friday for the past several months. And Friday's my cheat day. So, I have a theory that if you're going to be strict about your personal rules and regulations, when you have a cheat day, you should use it because, what good is being strict on all the other days if you can't. So if you don't mind, Dennis, we discussed yesterday.
Why would I mind?
Okay,
why would I mind? No.
Good. So I'm just gonna sip on a little bit of rum during our call.
So is today your birthday?
Tuesday's my birthday, but of course Tuesday falls on a Monday to Friday, so I won't be able to consume any alcohol on Tuesday.
Well,
so and
cheers.
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 And what better time to have a sip of rum than with a good friend?
1985. That goes a long way back.
Well, let's start there. What were you doing in 1985? Because I know you were already at it.
In 1985, I was living in San Diego. I was doing my first postdoc after I got my PhD, and I was down in San Diego doing this really boring postdoc, which was kind of a transition to NIH, which I went to a couple of years later. I got my degree at UBC in 1984, and then I went down to the States to, find a job, find a postdoc, find a gig at some point, and I ended up in San Diego. But the best thing that happened that year, the most interesting thing that happened was that I got invited to a symposium that Eduardo Luna was organizing in Bogota in the summer of '85, the International Congress of the Americas, or the Americanists, I guess it is, which is like a huge, multi-country conference, all the New World countries and so on. They send delegates. It's kind of a big deal. And he was carrying out he had organized a satellite symposium on ayahuasca, and they would not, they wouldn't let him come they wouldn't allow it to be discussed in the main, venue, but they permitted all these satellite symposia. So I went down to meet Eduardo down there, and I gave my presentation. I just published a few of my papers from my ayahuasca work. So I gave my presentation, and that's a whole other story that we don't really need to go into. But then after that, Eduardo and I went to Peru together, and incidentally, at that Congress, one of the other presenters at Eduardo's symposium was Guillermo Arevalo, the Shipibo guy, and he was there. That was the first time I'd ever met him, and that was before his proclivities came out. He was much younger, obviously, as we all were, and was respectable. I was like, this young Shipibo aspiring ethnobotanist and shaman and so on. So we hung out and at this conference, and then Eduardo and I, uh, well, the funny part of it was, so Eduardo at that time was living, in Florencia, which is where he grew up, right? He came to Bogota for the conference, and then we visited Florencia after that. And he stayed there for a few weeks, and I went on to Iquitos, and I met up with these two Iranian guys that I didn't know anything about, but they had approached me in San Diego, and they wanted me to take them down and introduce them to ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever was available. So I accepted because that was the way to finance the trip, so they paid for my trip and so on. I went to Iquitos and they were there. We were there a couple weeks and we did some ayahuasca, we did mushrooms. And then Eduardo joined me later, first in Pucallpa. He came to Pucallpa because at that time, after this Iquitos thing, I went to Pucallpa to reconnect with Don Fidel Mozambite, who was a Kokama shaman who lived outside Iquitos or outside Pucallpa. And so Eduardo came down for that and met Don Fidel. And he came to Pucallpa because Francisco Montes, who you may know, he now lives in Iquitos. Francisco years later set up the Jardín Ethnobotanico Sachamama outside Iquitos. But at that time, he was living in Pucallpa, where he's from, and he had collected a lot of plants for me specifically, over the last couple of years, because 85, I had left. The last time I'd been in Pucallpa was 81, and he'd been collecting and accumulating these plants, which we were going to export to Hawaii, and that's why Eduardo came. But the interesting and memorable thing about that was that in 81, I had connected with Pablo Amaringo.
The painter, famous painter.
Yeah, the visionary painter, but he wasn't a visionary painter at that time, right? He was nobody. He was a teacher. He was he taught English in the local high school. And this was 81. I'd finished my field work. I was actually on the way back to Canada, but I'd stopped in Pucallpa and to see Don Fidel and to drink with him and so on. So I was just passing through, and I was in this little village. I think it was called where Pablo lived. It's called Pueblo Joven Sanchicero or something like that. I was just having a beer in the bar, and this guy approached me, this little man, and said in quite adequate English, "Could I buy you a beer?" And I said, "Sure." And that was Pablo Amaringo. So we had a nice conversation, and then he mentioned that he was the local English teacher and that he was also an amateur painter. So we went over to his house just across the street, and he showed me some of these paintings, which were all realistic, not visionary, and not particularly good. I mean, it was like, I was polite. I said, "Oh, this is very nice," but I wasn't particularly impressed. I was impressed with Pablo, as just such a nice man. He pulled a bunch of his friends together, and we had a nice concert, impromptu concert on the day I was supposed to leave. So that was that. And then I went on to, I went back to San Diego, and that was 81. I went back to Vancouver, but then in 85, I came back down when I was living in San Diego, and I reconnected with him. Well, this time Eduardo was there. So I took Eduardo over to the house to introduce him. And of course, in this situation, with perfect Spanish, which mine wasn't then, and it's a little better now, but it wasn't very good then. So I couldn't really, discuss anything in depth with Pablo. It was, just polite conversation. But with Eduardo there, we started interrogating him. And
so Eduardo's bilingual then. Luis Eduardo Luna is bilingual.
Eduardo and Pablo could have a conversation. And so Pablo told us his story, which was that, he had been a shaman, he had been an ayahuasquero, but he had left, he had stopped doing it because he got into a shamanic battle with some brujos that were out to get him. So he figured, well, either I'm going to get killed or I'm going to have to kill somebody. So I'm just stepping out of the whole thing, and that was the story he told us. And then Eduardo said, well, something came up about how do you remember anything about your visions, about your experiences? And Pablo said, oh, yes, I remember everything perfectly. Literally eidetic memory. I mean, that's not what he used, not how he described it, but he said, I remember all my visions in detail. And Eduardo at that point said, well, you're a painter. Have you ever thought about trying to paint your visions? And you could see the light bulb go on over his head because it's like it never had occurred to him.
An inflection point that would place him smack dab in the immortal, eternal history of the ayahuasca scene of the next 20 years or so.
Yeah, I'm not hearing what you're saying very
Just
well.
saying that was an inflection point in his history.
Yeah, absolutely. That was an inflection point, where Eduardo, put this idea into his head, and we spent some more time with him that afternoon. We came back the next morning, and he had completed the first 4 paintings that he ever made. And he gave each of us 2 of these paintings, which I still have. And
wow.
And that was the beginning of his career. So he started becoming extremely prolific with these visionary paintings, and Eduardo started working with him to publicize them, to help find buyers for them. He organized, I think, an exhibition in LA and an exhibition in Helsinki, and then Pablo was, on his way toward fame and fortune, basically. And so that was the beginning of it right there. And that was kind of an interesting, I would call it an inflection point, because the influence that his paintings have had on the whole sort of emergence of ayahuasca into the global consciousness.
Well, that's a little bit like the pot calling the kettle black, hey?
What's that?
I said that's a little bit like the pot calling the kettle black.
Yes. So anyway, that's what I was doing in 1985. So that was kind of an important year in that sense, in that it started this whole thing. And then Eduardo stayed with me, and then we came back to San Diego together, and we had all these live plants that Francisco Montes had collected for
ayahuasca
us.
Plants.
So all kinds of plants, but yeah, ayahuasca and chacruna and many other of the admixture plants. And that was part of that, and the plants I collected in 81 were really the seed of botanical dimensions, So that existed. We got them out to Hawaii, and that they are there now, So there were basically 2 periods when I brought plants out to Hawaii. The first was in 1981 after I'd finished my collections, and then this was the second sort of group
See that
came out.
That just absolutely blows my mind. That literally the year I was born, which is almost 40 years ago. Like, I'm turning 39 on Tuesday, man.
You're such a youngster, man.
Right. But the year I was born, you were down in South America collecting psychedelic plants and basically proliferating them around the world. Like, so, okay, so a couple of years ago, I released a documentary that you were featured in called The Plant Teacher, right? It has an interview with you, which is amazing. And I recall, like, I was already in Costa Rica when we released that. And I recall one night, like after we had just released it, I was watching it with my Costa Rican girlfriend, and I'm watching your interview, and I start to well up, like I start to tear up a little bit, because I'm like, Jesus, man. Before I even started, like, here I am just building my second ayahuasca center here in Costa Rica, right?
Yeah.
And before I even tried ayahuasca myself, this was years ago, like 8 years previous to this point in time or whatever. I was watching you on other people's documentaries, the DMT, the spirit molecule, and I forget what the other one was, the spirit plant or something like that. No.
Yeah, DMT, the spirit molecule.
That one, and then there was another one that had Guillermo Arevalo in it, but I can't.
Vine of the Souls.
So I remember, and then you were involved in this reality sandwich website. So, like, I was just this, like, I had no idea about ayahuasca, and I start learning about it 10 years ago from you. And, actually 10 years ago, in November of 2009, I had a big accident, and I was in Australia. I fell off a cliff and, like, broke my legs, and just massive damage, and just really terrible experience of my life. And I spent 40 days and nights in the hospital in Australia. And at that point, I was like, okay, I need to change my life. Like, my life is just an absolute catastrophe. I was 28, 29 years old. I had nothing going for myself. I had a lot of, like, psychological problems. Well, I mean, I had outward life problems, and I realized that was all based in my own psychology, my own traumas from the past, and my own psychological kind of issues were contaminating my actions in life, and that was contaminating my outcome in life. And so I'm sitting in this hospital in 2009, 2010, just like, it was kind of over. The accident happened in November of 2009, and I was in the hospital until, January of 2010. And I'm in that hospital, and I'm like, dude, my life literally could not get any worse than it is right now. And I'm like, I need to change something. Like, I need to change what's going on in my mind, because I couldn't get through a day without having these, self-defeating, self-castigating thoughts that were just, like, just uncertainty about who I was or what my capabilities were, like, just anything. It was just a terrible, terrible wreck. And I, from the hospital bed, I was researching ayahuasca, and I saw that you were doing a retreat at Chimbre in Peru, in Puerto Maldonado, in 2010, in like April or May of that year. And so, from the hospital bed, I'm like, I made an internal decision, like, okay, I'm going to do this. I think I might want to try ayahuasca. I was terrified of it, but I thought, I'm going to try it. And so, and I found this retreat at Chimbre. I was following the Reality Sandwich and Daniel Pinchbeck and all these guys back in the day who are kind of, not so relevant now, but they were back then when all this was just getting started. Or, I mean, well, obviously not for you, but for a lot of the wider population just getting started. And of course, I made an attempt to go to your retreat. I quit Australia, after about 4 months of recovery. I quit Australia. I made a decision to go back to Canada, but along the way, I flew from Australia. I stopped in LA and I thought, okay, well, once from LA, I'm going to fly down to Lima and go to Dennis McKenna's retreat. This is in 2010, right? I didn't make a booking. I didn't make a reservation. I didn't pay any money. My grand master plan was just to show up and knock on the door and be like, hey guys, could you please let me in? And so I flew down to Lima and I made a bus trip up to Cusco, and I didn't make it any further than Cusco. I got robbed. My plan was to go from Cusco on the bus down to Puerto Maldonado, but I got robbed. I got sick. I had no money. I was recovering from the opiate addiction from the accident. And I was just in a really bad form. So I ended up flying back to Canada from Cusco. And so I didn't actually get to your retreat, but I'm just telling this story to give a context for so that was in 2010. And in 2017, I am watching a documentary that I made with you in it. And I'm at the second ayahuasca healing center that I built in the past several years. And I just came to this realization, holy shit, man. This is legitimately crazy. And I started to cry. I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe that Dennis McKenna, I'm buddies with Dennis McKenna. He's in my film. He's an advisor for Soltara. And man, life is just crazy. So all that being said, you've been in this game for so long, as long as I've been alive, you have been in this game. So how mind-blowing is it to have been able to watch and participate in this whole psychedelic renaissance basically since it began?
Well, it's been interesting. Obviously, the first thing I would say is you shouldn't regret not going to Chimbri, because that whole thing turned out to be, a real clusterfuck, if I could use that term. I mean, I got sucked into that scene, and it pretty quickly became clear that, this shaman they had, Moncoludo, was, I wouldn't even say he was a brujo. I think he was just a bad person, basically. And I had been to Chibri once before they actually opened in 2009. This guy, Rob Velez, the New York Peruvian, but New York stockbroker and so on, wanted me to come down and see it. And while it was building, so I took, most ridiculous trip you could imagine. I took a 4-day trip to Puerto Maldonado. I flew in. We did ayahuasca the first night. We did Wachuma the second night, and I flew out the third night, the fourth night. Anyway, I'm very glad that, and then later in 2010, he had this grand opening. And by that time, I had really I'd become very disenchanted, and I thought there was a lot of, shenanigans going on and just bad stuff. And it's late, I had a huge falling out with Rob. We had a big fight, and I told Rob, you keep this up, you're going to kill somebody. Well, 2 years later, that prophecy came true. But I had long since abandoned them and just didn't. But anyway, we don't need to get into all that. But I've been involved with ayahuasca, I guess, really seriously since I went to Peru in 1981. My brother and his wife at the time went to Pucallpa in 1976. And I was a graduate student in Hawaii at the time. And they went to Pucallpa, and they're the ones that connected with Don Fidel. And then when I went in 81, that's why I went to Pucallpa, because I had a contact there to, in the form of Don Fidel, who turned out to be really the real deal, an excellent shaman and a good man. And he was very kind, to me and my colleague, this other graduate student. I mean, we kind of, stumble into his courtyard and, no way to, 85, you don't send a text, you don't use a phone, you just show up. And we came to his courtyard and to his very humble house outside this village of Pueblo Joven, Sanchicero, that Pablo lived in, and long before I met Pablo. And we just kind of showed up and said, we're here. We want you to teach us everything you know about ayahuasca, in our broken Spanish. And he kind of looked at us and he kind of smiled and he said, okay. So we ended up, he was our main guy. That's really when I got started. We did stay with him, but we visited many times and while we were there, and took ayahuasca with him. And he was, kind enough to prepare it for us and let us document all that. And, we could play the whole ethnobotanist thing. Took samples from him back to British Columbia to analyze. And, I really, really regretted that I never got back to him. I always figured there'll be time to go back, and I never did it. He must have been about 60 when I was there, and then I would hear occasionally that he was, still doing fine and so on. And then I heard he passed away, maybe in around the late 90s or something. So I never got back there, but that's what got me started on ayahuasca, was that and the graduate work. And then, I got my degree, and then I got another postdoc at NIH, and didn't really do anything with ayahuasca at NIH. I had intended to, but it didn't turn out that way. I ended up working on some other aspect of psychedelics, hallucinogens. But then in 1993, I organized this biomedical study of ayahuasca in Brazil with the UDV. So that was kind of returning to the study of it. And I've been involved in it in various aspects ever since, and still am. I have to say that, like for you, ayahuasca was a tremendous gift for you. You discovered it at a time in your life when everything was just falling apart.
It had already fallen apart. It wasn't even falling apart. It had fallen apart. It was rock bottom.
Yeah, it was rock bottom. Well, I didn't discover it that way, but I have to say, it's been a tremendous blessing for me. And one of the benefits is, not only have I learned from ayahuasca, hopefully I've learned from it, and you're familiar with it, what it can teach you, what you can learn from it, which is nothing more than a way to, be a better person. But I'm grateful to it, not only for that, but also for the sort of places it's taken me, geographically, the people I have met because of ayahuasca, and just this whole world, has been, sometimes I tell people, the most interesting things that have happened in my life have been directly or indirectly because of ayahuasca. So it's been a great gift for me, and a teacher, not just from taking it, but also from the places and experiences I've had as a result of being passionate about it. And, encountering many people who feel the same, of which I would include you, certainly. I mean, you, you reached a point of crisis in your life. You discovered ayahuasca, and then you turned around, and it was not a casual relationship. You dedicated your life to it, and look at what you've accomplished—a tremendous amount. And I have a great deal of respect for you and the challenges that you've overcome. To create these retreat centers in Peru. And then that didn't work out. Well, I mean, it worked out, but it kind of ran its natural course. And then you went to Costa Rica and you started it up again. And then everything is good. And then COVID comes along. And, so it's been hard. It's been very hard for you. But you keep going. There's something to be very much admired in that, I think.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. Just before I comment, to note that the stability of your camera, are you moving like your laptop a little bit, or?
Yeah, sorry. I got to keep my hands off my computer stand here. Yeah.
That'll be much better.
Right.
But anyways, yes, I mean, man, one, that means a lot to hear you say that. It really does. I mean, to hear you say that to me is very, very sweet and meaningful, and I appreciate that. It's actually a story that we hear like all the time. I mean, we see this all the time, right? But yeah, to think just like 10 years ago, it's literally 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was completely decimated. And here 10 years later, I'm on the path, man. I feel wonderful, not only about, what we've accomplished and everything like that. Like, I mean, we've done some pretty awesome things, but just in general with like, man, the way I feel every day, being on the path, being just a productive member of society, contributing to the well-being of other people as well through the work that we do is tremendously gratifying. Being able to support this movement, and to like, let's say, help break down some of the perceptual barriers and the legal barriers and the cultural barriers. I'll actually get into some of the legal barriers in a second here, kind of a new development. But to be working towards this movement, to be providing a place for people to come and have similar transformational experiences to what I've had and what many of us have had. I mean, most people who work with us, right? You don't just like, you don't go to college for a degree in ayahuasca. Well, maybe, that's becoming a little more normal, but the people who generally work in this field have had their own personal transformation with the medicine, and then work to provide that for other people and want to continue working in the field. I actually don't drink ayahuasca very often anymore. I think that's actually a good thing. Some people criticize me because, oh, well, you run an ayahuasca retreat, but you don't drink ayahuasca all the time. And I'm thinking, like, well, isn't ayahuasca supposed to work? Like, it's supposed to work, right? It's supposed to help you get on the path and help you feel good and help you have good relationships and help you contribute in a positive way to the world. And I mean, dude, just the quality of my relationships is incredible. The way I treat myself is incredible. I feel like I have discipline when I want to. I feel like I have freedom when I want to. I never feel like I'm out of control. I know what nourishes me and my soul. You know, I spend lots of time in nature. I feel like I've got a really great connection to the planet. Like living in Costa Rica, you know, provides a great opportunity to do that. Just spending a lot of time watching wildlife, watching the, you know, smelling the air, swimming in the ocean, walking in the forest, getting rained on, you know, like those things are really great. And I continue to take on the maximum amount of challenge that I can in a healthy way. You know, I'm not obsessed. I'm not like a workaholic who's obsessed about achievement or something like that. But I also recognize that I should push myself and contribute the maximum that I can in a healthy way. So, you know, I feel like ayahuasca has really, really helped me get into that groove where it's like, I mean, it's a good groove. And I don't need to keep drinking ayahuasca like every weekend, you know, or every month, because what am I doing that for? I've already, you know, it's like when you go into an ayahuasca ceremony, it's almost like a lecture, right? It's almost like a lecture, and then you get assigned homework. And then it's up to you to go and do the homework after, right?
Exactly. I mean, you don't drink it that often. I don't drink it that often. But, you know, and I've been sometimes criticized for that. And sometimes I feel like I should. But I'm kind of like you know. I mean, I think it was Alpert or Ram Dass or somebody who said, once you get the message, hang up the phone.
Exactly.
You know, I don't necessarily agree with that completely. I think that I think it's good to be able to touch bases with ayahuasca.
Maybe wait till the phone rings.
Maybe wait till the phone rings. You got the message. You've gone out. You're doing all of this stuff. You're directly influenced by ayahuasca to do it. You know, you're dedicated, but man, you're running a very complicated business. You know, you cannot necessarily be taking ayahuasca 3 times a week. That requires a lot of focus in itself. So I don't see any problem. You, just by the words you just said, you can what I get from that is you've internalized the message and you're carrying out the program. And you always have the option to go back and take ayahuasca once in a while, and that's kind of the place I've gotten to with it as well. You know, it's there, and I'll certainly, you know, I cherish it, I value it, but I don't necessarily have to take it all the time. You know, I'll take it when the opportunities are right. You know, and I think I shared with you a little bit earlier, that I had come to a place where I was feeling like, you know, like I was getting the message from ayahuasca that wasn't getting these big revelations and all that. And I was sort of saying, well, you know, maybe you have internalized the message. Maybe you don't need to drink all the time. I don't know how you feel about it, but I don't have, you know, I don't really have ambitions to be an ayahuasquero. You know, I'm not interested in pouring or dispensing or holding space. My job is different. You know, I'm a speaker, I'm an educator. I'm good at talking about it, you know.
Yeah,
but I leave it to professionals to organize you know, to hold the space and run the rituals. They know more than I do. And a lot of people have said, well, you know, how come you don't do this? And I say, well, I don't really feel qualified. You know, I've only been involved with it for 30 years, you know. I don't feel qualified, but that's not my role. My role is to, you know, I'm a talker. I'm a teacher and a talker. Okay. So that's what I do.
Well, two points on that. I mean, the ayahuasquero or healer, curandero or shaman, these roles do not just magically happen based on the amount of time that you have been taking ayahuasca, or the amount of ceremonies that you've done, or how much you know about ayahuasca from a scientific perspective. Those things happen with very intentional and very profound study of the plants, and very strict, very controlled plant diets, and very focused training from other maestros or maestras who have decades of not just experience drinking, but experience working in that world and taking the plants and knowing themselves to such a very intimate degree that they can not only heal themselves, but help to heal others. And second, I think it's totally acceptable that you know your role in this whole field. I mean, we all have our role in this field. We're all trying to support this field of work, right? And this movement. And I'm the exact same way. I know my role in this field. I know what I'm good at. I'm not trying to be good at things that I'm not good at. I'm just trying to do what I'm good at and play my role. And my role is entrepreneur. That's what I am. You know, I have visions. I assemble teams. I motivate people. I execute, I get things done, and I am able to use, I would say, not to like toot my own horn, but an exceptional talent or skill at exactly what I do to help build the platform for other people who have put in that time and that effort and that training to learn the actual technique of healing, which is its very own profession. And oftentimes,
Right.
you know, sometimes those people who are very, very good at the healing work, they're not so good at entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship is another thing that is a profession and a skill set and a talent that takes a lot of time and effort and trial and error and failures and restarts to really get good at. So working together, you know, that's what I really love about Soltara, is that our team, it's like we have the Navy SEALs, but everybody, it's like if you look at a battalion of the Navy SEALs, whatever they call it, it's like you have one guy who's on the machine gun, you have one guy who's on the radio, you have one guy who's a medic, you know, you have one guy who's a sniper, and like all these different roles within the battalion or the fire squad that result in one single deadly force. But not everybody does everything. It's like one person does one thing, and it's all in the name of providing, you know, maximum effectiveness as a team.
Yeah, I think exactly. Running a operation, a retreat center like you do, it is definitely a team effort, and you need good people, and that's, you know, you have this talent. You know, you are a leader and you attract good people, you know, and I admire you very much for that. I think Soltara is one of the best run retreat centers that I've ever had to do with. And you know, I think a big part of that is that there is there's an ethical basis to it. You know, you're an entrepreneur, but you're not out to, you know, profits over everything else. You know, you realize that there's a deeper level to this mission that you're on, and so, you know, you're not like blinded by the prospect of making money. There's probably easier ways to make money.
100%.
You know, than this.
100%.
Especially based on, you know, as a result of this last year, which has been, you know, very rough for you, but here you are, you're persisting. So I hope it comes out of that. I hope you get through that, and Soltara, you know, continues to be healthy, and we're all in a period of transformation here. I mean, I think 2020, you know, it's been a hell of a year. I mean, I think we'll look back on 2020 as the year that, well, basically the world ended. The world as we know it ended. And I think that what is gonna unfold after that, we're now living through that, and I think it's going to change a lot of things, and for one thing, uh, unfortunately, from your point of view, in terms of your business, I think that uh, people will not. There won't be so much travel. I mean, that's a problem when you're running a retreat center in an exotic country.
It might seem that way, but we have seen an incredible response and an incredible enthusiasm to our opening in November. I mean, we have sold out weeks in November. We have people are for this type of work. See, this is not just random travel. This is not just a random, all-inclusive week in Mexico at a $600 a week resort or something like that. Like, this is not just trying to get out of the country for lack of a better thing to do. People are guided to what we do, right? People want to come and do what we offer, have these profound experiences, have therapeutic experiences. And especially now with all the trauma that has originated in 2020, right? I mean, this has been a traumatic year. If you didn't have trauma before 2020, you certainly have trauma now that you have to deal with, right? But yeah, I mean, we were somewhat concerned, but at the same time, I was always optimistic that we would recover, and there were always very, very positive signs that we would recover. And I'm very, very excited and happy to say we did have many concerns, but we placed a bet on November 1. Back in July, we said we're going to open November 1, and we're just hoping for all the other chips to fall, like in time for that. So. They have. I mean, Costa Rica announced that all flights to the United States are open as of November 1. Canada just announced that they're going to eliminate the mandatory 14-day quarantine upon return in exchange for rapid testing. And, it looks like we just got a message that Peru and Costa Rica are opening up to each other. So, woohoo. And also, Costa Rica is eliminating the 72-hour PCR test regulation before coming here. So the world is moving again, and there's definitely a segment of the population that is more concerned about COVID, because the fact is that the risk profile is different for different people, right? Like, you have a right to be very concerned about COVID because the risk profile is different for you than it is for a guy like me. And that's just based on age, basically, and so some people are willing to take that chance. And not only we're willing to take that chance, but we're willing to overcome all of these other hurdles that were placed in the way by the governments. Like, you have to somehow get a PCR test and get your results back within 72 hours of landing in Costa Rica. So, that's like, you just can't do that everywhere. Like, there are some places where you can't do that. So, we've had people who couldn't come. They were booked, but they couldn't come because of that. But like, the fact that throughout November and December, when everything's just starting, the gears are starting to roll again, the fact that we have had a very encouraging response, and we've got sold out weeks. Like, even, you announced that you weren't able to come and visit us in December because of COVID concerns, obviously, which is totally justified. And we also, we lost Dorian for November as well. So just like, within the last kind of month or 6 weeks, we found out we had a month of like basically no bookings between mid-November and mid-December, but they're filling up. Like it's, I was worried, but they're filling up. And especially now that the flights are lifted. So in terms of us, like there are certainly some aspects of travel that are not going to be as convenient and as, random and spontaneous and cheap and inexpensive as there were in the past. So there's definitely going to be some permanent impacts on the travel industry. But I think fortunately, intentional travel, purpose-driven travel, like what we're involved in. Like it's not just travel. It's like you're coming to do something and it's like a pilgrimage, right? It's like a pilgrimage. People are willing to walk around or over the mountain to get to the holy place, right? So, yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's very good. If you can, I think that things are going to start opening up after the first of the year. Did I hear you say that Canada's about to lift their quarantine requirements?
Yeah. I saw an article in the Toronto Sun yesterday, sent to me by a friend of mine who, they said that, well, the airlines and the airports and basically every Canadian travel-related business has been begging the Canadian government to get rid of this mandatory quarantine, because it's not just like a suggestion, right? It's like when you return to Canada from another country, they threaten you with a $500,000 or $750,000 fine and jail time. And they literally force you to, like, you can't even go outside for a walk around the block. It's like you are forced to stay in place for 14 days. They call you every single day. They email you. Mm-hmm. If you don't pick up the phone, they send somebody over to your house to make sure you're there. This sounds a lot like fascism to me, and it's really, really worries me. And, I don't want to get into the controversial opinions I may have about COVID and the government's response, but that is really, really extreme. And so because that's so extreme, and I mean, you didn't come, that was one of the main reasons why you didn't come down. Even if you weren't super worried about COVID, you wanted to have Christmas with all of your with your family, your daughter's coming up there, right? So like you didn't want to have to go back and quarantine for 14 days and have the Canadian government breathing down your neck, making sure you're not talking to anybody, making sure you're not walking around the block, and so that was just basically decimating the Canadian travel operators' business, right? Like Air Canada, WestJet, all the airports, just ghost towns. So they had been pleading with the Canadian government for some time. And finally, the Canadian government approved rapid testing that can be done in airports. So people coming off the planes get tested in some facility, then they get released as they test negative. If they test positive, they have to quarantine or something like that. But I believe they're doing a test run in either Toronto or Calgary, and then they're going to roll it out nationwide if that works out well.
Well, so it is. Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I don't want to, have to quarantine when I come back, and then the other thing is, I'm really invested in not getting COVID if I can avoid it, because I have this, I'm a geezer, I'm an old guy. I have this intuition that it's going to be hard on me, so I'm trying to, just avoid getting it. But it looks like things are going to open up, and there's travel I'd like to do. I'd like to come to your retreat in January, if that happens, and then I need to get down to Peru pretty soon and see what's going on there. Not necessarily to do an event, but just to check it out. So how are you dealing with? You have groups coming. What do you do? Do you have a way to socially distance everybody, or you just?
Well, we're testing everybody. So everybody at this point is required to do a PCR test before they travel, and we've also set up a system here with one of the best probably the best hospital in Costa Rica, SEMA, to we had to ask everybody to come in 2 days early so they could get a COVID test upon arrival as well. So as you know, everybody stays at the Wyndham out by the airport. And so we have a room set up there. We're working with the Wyndham, and so a representative of the hospital will come out to the Wyndham on every Friday. So we start every retreat on Sundays. So every Friday at noon, the bus leaves at noon on Sunday. So every Friday at noon, we're doing PCR tests of the whole group. So we have the Wyndham people coming and doing a PCR test of the whole group and just making sure that everybody tests negative twice before they get on the bus and come here. Even if they're here, we do have protocols on site to improve sanitation and, not super strict social distancing, but I mean, we're pretty much social distanced the majority of the time. For example, in the Maloka, everybody sits 2 meters apart, like the spacing between the mat. They're all 2 meters apart. We're going to use disposable individual cups rather than the traditional kind of sharing the ceremonial cup. So you're not going to be, drinking out of the same cup as everyone else. We'll just increase spacing in the Maloka where it wasn't already sufficient. And the majority of the time, people are outside. So that has been stated as a factor that makes a difference. And also, UV light has also been proven as a factor that limits the lifespan of the virus, right? Or so starting in November, this is basically the beginning of summer in Costa Rica. And as you know, as you're quite well aware, the summertime in Costa Rica is very sunny and very hot and very dry, especially where we are. So, so, this kind of all this outdoor space and, you're not really packing anybody inside any really enclosed buildings. Even the restaurant is open air. The Star Deck is open air. The Maloka is open air. The only time people are ever really together in a room, in an enclosed room, is when they're in their actual rooms together, and we've also removed the quad suite. So we now only have 2 people maximum in a room. So all the rooms are now singles or doubles. And in addition to that, and actually on the legality aspect that I told you I would catch you up on earlier was that so maybe a month or so ago, I was contacted by the local Ministry of Health in the local municipality that we operate in, and so they had been contacted by the central federal Minister of Health. The Minister of Health from the federal government had been reviewing Soltara. So, we're here we're in Costa Rica. We did kind of an exhaustive legal study before we opened this company and made sure that there were no laws prohibiting ayahuasca in Costa Rica, although there's no real national patrimony like you have in Peru, right? So, So, we saw this as a gray area, but no specific reason to fear for our legal safety, right? So anyways, we started the company, we built everything, we started operating. We were very honest on our website about what we were doing. We did not try to obscure what we were doing. We did not try to cover up what we're doing online. We tried to provide high quality educational resources for people on our website, even though that made me a little nervous because I knew we were broadcasting to the world, to anybody who really wanted to know what we're doing. They can look at our website and figure out exactly where we are and exactly what we're doing, right? Including the Costa Rican authorities. So,
of course.
So they contacted me about a month ago, of course, in the middle of COVID, after not operating for 6 months. And they showed me the file they had on us, and they had literally analyzed all of our YouTube videos, all of our web content, everything, our personal social profiles, everything like that. And they concluded that we're not breaking any laws. We are not illegal, but we're working with an alternative therapy. So what the government asked us to do is just formalize, even though we have been working with doctors stateside, actually one of whom is here right now. We've been working with doctors and psychologists stateside for the intake process to make sure we screen, anybody who might become problematic with the medicine or for whom the medicine might be problematic. And,
Right.
and so, all of our intake information is in English and everything like that. So the Costa Rican government reached out and basically just said, okay, you guys are not breaking any laws. You're cool. You can do this here. But we would ask that you hire a Costa Rican doctor just to clear everybody before they go in there and before they leave, and to translate your intake forms into Spanish. So we basically just know what's going on with everybody. So we've hired a local Costa Rican doctor, and officially we are basically permitted by the federal government of Costa Rica to operate.
That's fantastic. That's great. I think it's been forced upon you by COVID to a certain extent, but that's something you wanted anyway. I mean, you don't have to be underground or anything anymore. You can, you've got the federal government knows what's going on, and they know that you're responsible, and you've hired this doctor, so now you can operate out in the open. I think Solterra must be an exception. I mean, there are other retreat centers there that are operating. I don't follow them. I don't know how well they're doing in these times, but you're going to come up, you're going to do fine. You're going to come up, the ship will be upright, and you're not going to sink, and you're going forward. So that's wonderful.
Well, I attribute that to the Navy SEALs I work with. It's really, I just play a small part in this whole grand scheme of things. But man, the people in this orbit, in the Solterra orbit, really humbled me, including yourself. And all the people that help make everything happen. It's absolutely incredible. But not to keep talking about Solterra. So recently in April, we celebrated the life of Terrance McKenna because he passed in April of 2000, right? Your brother, your older brother. We celebrated his life, and you guys did a conference. You did some kind of was it a symposium of something? I know Paul Stamets was involved.
Yeah, it was a series of things. It wasn't a one-day thing, but over starting in April and over the next few weeks, we had kind of an event every Sunday. So in a way, it was kind of like a podcast, but there were aspects of it that were live. And yeah, that was a great event. I wish that, we used Crowdcast for the web platform, which is not necessarily the best, but that's what we used. We had 10,500 people registered for that thing at one point, and I wanted it to be free. It was free access. I didn't want to, be cashing in on Terrance's legacy necessarily. Now I kick myself if we'd asked everybody to kick in a couple bucks.
That would have been justifiable, man. That would have been very, very.
We would have done very well, but I think we created a lot of goodwill through that, so that was good. And then we did this other symposium just last weekend on symbiosis, which was kind of a different thing. Not exactly what I thought it would be, but it was okay, and we did ask people to make a donation, and it turned out Well, we didn't get 10,000 people, but we got like 650 people to register. And, and it mostly turned out to be about permaculture and that sort of thing. And it was fine. It was not, a lot of people worked very hard. We made these connections in Australia with this symbiotic life, this Annalise Hordern, very well known in the permaculture area. So it was a good symposium. But I think also, as we do these, like when we did the thing in April, COVID was just really getting people's attention. And we were supposed to do that retreat or that event. We were going to do it in San Francisco with the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. So we had to cancel that. And we thought, well, let's just go online. So we did. We were one of the first to do that. Now everybody's doing it,
Yeah.
so the competition space is a lot tighter.
For the webinars.
And yeah, the webinars. I mean, any one weekend or any one day, you have a lot of webinars to choose from. Like this weekend, for example, the plant spirit medicine, spirit plant medicine conference in Vancouver is happening, and that's been an actual physical conference for a good 10 years. This is the first year they've gone virtual. So that's happening this weekend, but there are 3 or 4 others that you could choose from. So, and I spend so much time on Zoom,
there's only so much time you can spend on Zoom, right? I mean, like,
well, it sucks the soul, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, you become a zombie or something. So I'm going to make a very brief, like 10-minute appearance at that conference, and I may look in on 1 or 2 of the talks. But this symposium conference last weekend, because I had to be there like 6 hours a day for 2 straight days. I don't think we want to do that anymore.
Right,
We're not going to do multi-day symposia. I think an afternoon is probably about as much as you can get away with. And and also, the podcast model is maybe better, like we're doing, because you can post, people can watch them whenever they want.
That's my argument against the new normal, is that people just don't want to be, you might as well plug yourself into the matrix, right? People don't want to be just sitting in front of a screen all day long. So that's why I think people will very easily forget the fear of not being together. But so how did Terrance's passing affect your view of life and death?
Well, you mean 20 when it happened, or 20 years later?
Yeah, I mean, like both? How strange is it to lose a brother, and not just a brother, but such a prolific public figure who left such a legacy?
Well, it's very difficult. It was difficult because we were very close, and I still miss him a lot.
And you get reminded of him very often.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, he's achieved this sort of weird immortality, in the sense that he's become a ghost of the internet. He's all over YouTube. He's very much there. He's still part of this conversation that really he's been having with his fan base since the late 80s. And because he was so far ahead of his time, you look into some of his talks that are posted on YouTube. I mean, it's very relevant to the times we're in right now. That it could have been recorded yesterday in terms of its relevance to what is going on now. So he's very much alive in that sense. And personally, to me, he's alive. I feel close to him. I think if you have a loved one, a sibling or somebody like that, I don't know if there's an afterlife, but I think that people live on in the memory of the people of their families, and that's a certain kind of survival after death. I mean, my mother died 50 years ago. She died in 1970. So what is it? More than 50 years ago. Yeah, it's 50 years ago. I mean, I still miss her almost as much as Terrance in a certain way. So he's very much alive. It was really a blow to lose him. And it's, I think it's different, when somebody like that, who is, he was a minor celebrity, at least, he touched a lot of people's lives, and he was very much beloved, and I think the community, we were all made very sad when he died, and we lost somebody great. But at the same time, we have his legacy, and his legacy lives on in the material that he left behind.
Well, many people didn't even learn who Terrance was until after he passed away. Like I said, many people, including myself, I didn't know who Terrance was until after he had passed away, right? But you're seeing all this content about him.
Yeah, that's true. And not so many people knew, and like a lot of the people that, I go to conferences or I interface with people who say, your brother changed my life. Everything I've learned has been because of him and so on. And I'm like, what the hell? You were in diapers when Terrance was at the peak of his career, and now these young people are rediscovering it, and I'm sort of I don't know if I'm jealous exactly, but it's like, he's more famous than I am, and he's been dead for 20 goddamn years. How does that work? And here I am, I'm just kind of going along and trying to carry on not the legacy, but I mean, I do my own thing, and I get recognized for it, so I guess that's good. If when I die, if I get an obituary in the New York Times like he does, I guess I'll be pretty happy. But I'm not planning to check out anytime soon. But I'm sure he wasn't either. I mean, it's just, death is one of these things that comes on. I remember when he was in his last stages of life, I said, well, because I was spending lots of time with him, obviously, kind of a vigil. And there were times, in the last couple of weeks when he couldn't talk, but before that, we had conversations. And I said, well, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about dying? And he said, well, it's terribly inconvenient.
That's still classic.
So, yeah. Anyway.
So okay. You mentioned you weren't sure about life after death. Do you have any opinions on what happens when we die? Did Terrance have any opinions on what happens when we die? And, do you think that plants, animals, including humans, experience any type of life after death?
Well, I don't know. I think this is where you have to invoke science in a certain way. And, one of the good things about science is you can always retreat into the suspended judgment. You can say, like you say, well, do we survive? death? Is there some kind of life after death? And the honest answer is nobody knows. We know that there are near-death experiences, and people come back and they relate all those things that are typical of near-death experiences, but near-death experiences are not death. They are an extreme state.
It could be a psychedelic state.
May probably do involve the production of endogenous psychedelics and DMT. But it's definitely, dying is probably one of the most stressful things that you can do other than being born. And it's gonna internally, it's gonna change your neurochemistry, and it may induce things like DMT, endogenous DMT, which tend to show up in states of high stress. So near-death experience and the DMT experience are very similar, as you know, and they may actually involve similar neurochemistry. But can you extrapolate that to death itself? I don't know. I don't know. The scientific, stance would be that, consciousness does not survive after death, that it requires a nervous system and a physical support to operate, but then maybe it does. There's other reasons, and certainly history and all that, religion and all that, to indicate that maybe somehow consciousness is able to make that transition. I think nobody really knows.
So have your views on organized religion changed over time?
Well, I don't know where you want to start counting from.
Well,
yeah, I don't have much use for organized religion as such. Which is different than spiritual traditions or your own, spiritual practices. I think that organized religions are mainly about power and not so much about helping people save their souls, whatever that is. I think a lot of it is about telling you what you're not supposed to do, and more importantly, what you're not supposed to think, and so it discourages. I am suspicious of any tradition or organization that tells you we have all the answers. All you have to do is follow us, accept the doctrine. You can turn off your mind. You can stop worrying about this stuff, and it'll all be good because just have faith. Well, I think faith is an impediment to understanding, and I think faith encourages you to stop asking questions. And I think when you stop asking questions, you stop learning. I think we have to learn to live with uncertainty. And I think there's just certain things that we just are probably not going to know. I don't think even when you die and after you die, I don't think it's like, even if you survive death in some way, it's not necessarily, okay, oh, now I get it. Oh, it was all about that. You may be just as confused after you die as before you die, and we're all, in that sense, we're curious monkeys. We're trying to understand the cosmos. We're trying to understand our place in it. And we're working with insufficient data perpetually, So it's okay to say we don't have the answers. We don't know enough, And I think that's something that, I think that's a good thing to internalize that lesson. I think that science itself is sometimes a bit too arrogant. They forget. Scientists should remind themselves all the time how little we know. I mean, science understands a very tiny slice of reality, and it understands even that incompletely. So there's no place in science for arrogance because, but you see a lot of arrogance in science, and you see certain individuals who say, well, yeah, well, science has this all figured out. We pretty much know what is going on. And my answer is no, you don't know
Right.
shit. You don't know very much at all. And of course, we have ayahuasca, which is always there to remind us, to kind of slap us upside the head and don't get, don't forget how little you know, and just keep the question open. And I think that's a good thing because I think it keeps everything fluid. You do not There is no final answer. I think you can't reach a conclusion about something and say, okay, we understand this. We can wrap this up, put it on the shelf, and stop thinking about it. I mean, it doesn't work that way. So I think ayahuasca is a very good, and all the psychedelics, but especially ayahuasca is a very good teacher for reminding us that, our picture of reality is incomplete. And I'm okay with that. That means there's more to learn. And I think learning, if you like to learn things as I do, then that's very satisfying. But you should, the satisfaction comes in the process. It's not that there's some answer out there that you finally reach and you say, oh, this is it. I don't think it works that way.
Well, I'd like to touch on like kind of the science of psychedelics in a second, but you commented on us monkeys trying to understand our place in the cosmos and doing the best we can. What do you think of Elon Musk and SpaceX and his desire to go to Mars, or rather to become an interplanetary species, and everything that everybody's working on now to, get off this planet and get out amongst the stars? And what do you think about all that?
Well, I think that ultimately that may be our destiny. I think that we do have this. It's built into our genes in some ways, or our human story. We have this yearning to explore. But to go to the stars, if you look at just the physical challenges of that, and the limitations on technology and so on, just to get to the nearest star, 4 light years away, which is, a long, long way when you think about it. And if we were going to try and go there in a spaceship, given the propulsion technologies that we have and so on, it would take at least 500 years. Unless somehow we figure out faster than light.
What about Mars, though? You can do Mars. I mean, Mars is going to happen. Like, they're going to do a Mars trip in 2024. They're going to send unmanned.
Yeah, the inner solar system. Yes, I think we can probably establish a presence in the inner solar system. But this is a multi-century challenge. I don't think it's going to happen probably in our lifetime. We may live to see people go to Mars, but they're not going to live there. We'll see people go to moon. One of the things that bothers me in some way about the whole focus when you talk about the space program, you talk about Mars. We want to go to Mars. Why go to Mars? Why go from one gravity well to another? Go to a place that is, there are no resources, there's no water, why would you go to this place? What are you going to do there once you get there? I think it's far better to focus on let's get a permanent presence in space. Space, let's build these space colonies or whatever you want to call them, because that's where the energy is, that's where the material is. That's what we should be focusing on, not necessarily. I mean, that was the mistake we made with going to the moon. Okay, we came to the moon, got a bunch of rocks, brought them home. Now what? I mean, it's like they're, I mean, I'm very happy that we went to the moon, but in some ways it was a political, program rather than a scientific one. I think, we will see what happens. But I think that we have to realize that sure, we can think about leaving the planet and so on, but for the moment, this is where we are. As they say, there is no planet B.
Right.
This is the one. We gotta make this work. And we're not making it work.
Do you think that calculating, like, for example, thinking about when we look at terraforming Mars, for example, right? We're looking at a planet completely objectively. There are no politics on Mars. There are no red states and blue states. There are no communist and democratic countries. No,
but if we get there, there will be all those things because we'll bring them with us.
What I'm wondering though is, like, is there a transformative effect that transmutes into a way of looking at this planet when the scientific community and the global community starts looking at this other planet of, like, oh, well, we would like to take this planet and look at it as a completely enclosed global system, right? It's like a global system. It's like it's one thing. And you start looking at that planet like, well, how do you terraform this planet? How do you start to manipulate the systems of that planet to have the effect that is conducive to harbor life, right? If you start looking at that planet, does it then start to calculate to more people that, well, actually the same principles affect on this planet? The same principles. Okay, well, this planet has an atmosphere that encompasses the entire planet. This planet has, the forests that we have serve a function in generating that atmosphere. The oceans that we have serve a function in the balance of the planet and the rotation of the planet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as it goes on like that. Whereas now, a lot of the resistance to, let's call it climate science, or the scientific community that is forwarding these ideas of modeling climate and looking at the world as kind of this whole kind of interconnected system. And we, obviously both have theories about the Gaia hypothesis and everything like that. But what's getting in the way right now is that people are still kind of locked into their position from a single country or a single state or a single city or a single region, and almost denying that what they're doing there has an impact on the entire global system, right? And these kind of science deniers. I mean, I'm not trying to say that everything purported as science is word is gold or scientific, but there's kind of a variety of resistance out there to the models, the climate models, et cetera, that have been put forward, and the proposals to treat the planet like it is one system, which it is, rather than, well, this country's doing this thing and that country's doing that thing. And
right, you got to bring this global perspective into it. Saving the planet should be, as you say, a planetary effort. All the nations, all the people on Earth should get all hands on deck to help save this planet, because we've all got to live there. And going to Mars might help or even putting colonies on the moon, because it helps reintroduce that global perspective into it. But I think before we can think about, terraforming Mars, which is possible,
We should terraform Earth.
yeah, let's terraform Earth. So
We're
far.
already like
And we
90% of the way there.
what's
We're
that?
already like 90% of the way there. We've got a huge head start.
Yeah,
All we have to do is optimize the terraforming of Earth to be like just a garden paradise.
Exactly. And so far our track record is not good. I mean, we should be terraforming Earth. That just amounts to, making sure it works, making sure all the planetary systems work and stay into equilibrium. We're busily undermining them, dismantling them, and so we have to get straight about that before we can go to a planet like Mars and screw it up. Maybe we should repair our own world first. I think this is important. But that said, I'm not against terraforming Mars. But this is governments and institutions. This is a long-term project. I mean, this is not something you can do in the next quarter. This is like a 500-year project before you would even be able to see much effect. Governments and institutions are not set up to work on that time frame. That's part of the problem. We can't look ahead that far.
Yeah.
But I think that's it's possible. And again, I think one reason why we should look at getting this this permanent presence in space, getting infrastructure in space in near Earth orbit by building things like space towers and space colonies and this sort of thing. For one thing, all the energy and material is there. The energy in the form of solar energy, and the materials in terms of asteroids, which are loaded with metals and carbon and all sorts of things. So if you try to lift all heavy industry off the surface of the planet, that takes a lot of pressure off the ecosystem. But that has to be a collective effort. It can be done, but what we don't have is the will to do it, the will to work collectively in collaboration with other governments. We're too busy fighting everybody,
Right.
To actually say, look, we're looking at, if we're lucky, we're looking at 30 years. That's probably way too long. We're looking at a very short time frame before the Earth will essentially be uninhabitable, or uninhabitable in great parts of it. I mean, this is known if the current trends continue. So there's still time, but there's less and less time all the time. A certain point you reach where these systems that keep things in equilibrium, they are very resilient. They will tend to repair themselves, but at a certain point, if you push them too far, then they can't do it. You reach a tipping point, and they're not able to reestablish themselves, and that's what we're getting very, very close to. And so that's.
So I've got maybe a strange vision, a strange dream that I haven't really made public yet. Some of my friends know what it is. I would like to be the first person to host an ayahuasca ceremony in space.
To own someone?
No, to host an ayahuasca ceremony in space. A legit Shipibo ayahuasca ceremony in space. So you were talking about like getting infrastructure going in space, before we get to the red planet and everything. I mean, that's already happening. Like there are people that are developing space hotels, and with the launches getting more and more frequent, this is literally within 5 or 10 years, this is going to become an actual feasible thing to do. So like kind of like my life mission is to be the first guy to set up an ayahuasca, a Shipibo ayahuasca ceremony in space. Are you with me? You going to come?
I'm totally with you.
Yes.
I mean, your idea is even crazier than mine. I didn't look for space necessarily, but one of my fantasies is to build a huge zeppelin or somehow get a zeppelin. This is my ego-inflated bananas idea for the future of the McKenna Academy. It will be based on an enormous zeppelin that will cruise the world and have ayahuasca ceremonies. I have this vision of, floating about 500 feet above the canopy of the jungle at dawn with Lyra's Icaros sort of rolling out over the landscape. And really, this is it's probably a fantasy, but if somebody came along with enough money to build one of these things or buy one, it would be like a floating campus for the academy, and it could be a nexus for environmental activism and all kinds of you have that thing jammed with telemetry and long distance cameras, all sorts of climate monitoring technology, and then you just use that essentially as a floating nexus point for putting out podcasts and just all kinds of things.
I don't think there's anything crazy about that idea. There's nothing crazy about that idea at all. In fact, I think it's brilliant. Just don't fill the blimp with hydrogen gas.
Well, we have to find somebody with deep pockets and a big imagination. I don't know how you get to Elon Musk or someone like that, but he might dig something like that.
Well, if we keep talking about doing ayahuasca in space, eventually we're going to need to contract Elon and SpaceX to get us up there, and that's my goal. I mean, I got massive respect for Elon. I hope that someday we're going to be best friends. I'm pretty confident that we will be. So, I just have to keep talking about going up to space and doing ayahuasca in space and being the first guy to do that.
He would probably get it. I'm sure he's been beyond the chrysanthemum a few times. I think he's pretty.
I've heard that through the grapevine, but
Yeah, I think so.
So let's end on the McKenna Academy. You touch on the McKenna Academy. You have a bunch of ideas. You over the last couple of years that we've been working together, you have, I've heard you many times talk about your dreams and your visions with the McKenna Academy, and now you are like executing on it. The website looks great. If it wasn't for COVID, you'd be doing very well with the retreats that you had organized that you would have been executing on. And so how does it feel to be finally, kind of executing on this big vision that you've had for all these years? And, what's going on?
Well, we're doing, COVID has really caused us to change our plans, but the plan still remains the same. It's just the time frame has changed. We still would like to have a permanent place in the Sacred Valley or something like that where we could have these retreats and so on. But obviously we can't do that. I was hopeful that by, this time next year, we would actually be further along with that. And it may still happen. I've made connections with a lot of people with resources, and they're interested in acquiring this place down there. And for many of them, a few $1 million is not such a huge amount. So we'll just see what happens. Yeah. I'm going to have to leave. Actually, I don't know if we covered. I doubt we covered everything you wanted to, but we can circle back on this. But I've got some other calls coming up.
Sure.
Did we get?
Yeah, whatever
You want to be?
what would be then you mentioned the UNAP project. What is there anything lastly you'd like to state about the McKenna Academy and where you're going, or how do people participate? How do people get in touch with you? What do you want to close on?
Just visit the website. It's McKenna.academy and see what we're doing. We've got resources there. We've got events. We've got links to interesting things, and we have plans for events in the future. And we're just trying to operate in this virtual environment as much as we can. We've always wanted to have a strong web presence, and so COVID's kind of, all of a sudden that becomes the priority. But we're still hoping to be able to do retreats or conferences or whatever, in not necessarily in South America, but also in other places. So it's ongoing, Dan. We're just making it up as we go along, basically. But people can look at the website, and people with good ideas, we want to hear from them. People able to financially support it. I guess one of the big thresholds we've crossed recently is we've incorporated a 501c3 in the States. Originally, we did that in Canada, but then we decided to do nonprofit in the States because it's easier to give people tax deductions that way. And we're just continuing, and that's what we're doing.
Good. Well, I'm very happy to see that your dream has come to fruition. I absolutely support you, and I'm happy to help out in any way I can with the McKenna Academy. It's just an absolutely incredible legacy that you and Terrance have created. I'm certainly, reaping some of the rewards of that legacy as my whole team and the people who come to see us. You've really, really transformed the world in many ways. And, it's a real honor to have you come on the show and have a casual conversation with me. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You're very kind. I think the world is transforming itself. But you and I and people like us, we're trying to nudge it along a little bit. So it's very good. I'm looking forward. If I've been talking to Melissa about maybe giving some Zoom lectures to your next retreat group in November or whenever it starts. So I'm totally down for that. We'll just keep the conversation going and see how it goes. I can come back and do another podcast. We lost some time with all the tech stuff, but I'm really happy to be working with you, Dan, and I want to help you too as much as I can. So we'll leave it there.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a real pleasure, man. Thank you so much. And the most important thing is that you stay safe. Get through this whole kind of health crisis. Get yourself vaccinated if that proves to be safe, and then you're good to go. But the most important thing is that you stay safe. So just take care of yourself, man, and all the best. Enjoy your weekend.
You too. Thanks.